We're going to talk to Mercedes Ballard and Kristin Bonds, and they're going to discuss that very thing. The world of work is dramatically changing, and the time to revolutionize the workplace is now. Heristic co-founders Mercedes and Kristin will discuss their workplace culture and audit, and how to build inclusion into the bones of any organizations. Questions are welcome, and I believe we have our very own PowerToFly DEI consultant Zara is back to moderate, I believe. So I will welcome all of you to the platform here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hunter. Mercedes and Kristin, I'm so excited to dive in a little bit more and hear from you both. And so just a very sort of informal question to start us off so that we can learn a little bit more about both of you. Would love to hear not only a little bit more about each of you, but what inspired you to start Heuristic?
Yeah, thank you, Zara. It's so nice to be here. We're really excited. And I apologize for my weird cell phone video, but I'm here. We're making it work. The story of how we came together is actually really funny. Both Mercedes and I have long careers working in HR and leadership at various tech companies, and most recently at a couple of startups. And Mercedes was actually a vendor partner for me at my last startup for almost 2 years. She was my dedicated point of contact. We had weekly meetings. We got to know each other really, really well. And for most of those 2 years, I was trying to recruit her away from her agency to come work with me at the startup. And I'm proud to say I was successful after a long courtship. She ended up joining us at our last startup in March of 2020. And we never even got to work at desks next to each other because we both got laid off from that startup because of COVID in May. And we took a little bit of time to rest and process all the trauma of isolation and lockdown and stuff that was happening around this time last year. And we decided that we couldn't find a good reason not to try to strike out on our own. This was the season of racial justice, and we are both activists, longtime activists. And in that summer of last year, with all of those movements taking place all over the country, all over the world, it really inspired us to step into this space. Having worked in tech for 10, 15 years between us, talking about DEI all the time, but not really seeing fundamental change until last year, we saw a moment to step in and push this work forward. So we took it.
Yeah, and that's the story of how Heuristic came to be with our name. So it's actually a play on words, the word heuristic, meaning to teach someone to teach themselves. And when we were coming up with the idea of what our business is going to be, we both have a soft spot in our hearts for startups, and we really understand the value of like getting an organization early and putting the best processes, the best policies in place to really foster an environment where like people can show up to work and like really bring their full selves to work. It's a personal project of mine because not only am I an activist, but I have had the privilege of working in places where they've allowed me to bring my full self to work. And I mean all intersections of my identity. I've been able to step into a workplace and really that has enabled me to thrive. I would not be where I am in my career if it wasn't for that. And, I see a lot of my colleagues from the same university, they went off and they joined, Fortune 500 companies, and I talk to them and we reminisce and everything. But the one thing that we we really differ on is they talk about how miserable they are at work and how it's just like they're a cog in a machine and like they don't really feel appreciated. And, they're having to put a facade on when they come to work. And for me, it's like, we spend so much of our time at work, so much, like 40 to 60 hours, depending on what industry you're in. And to be in a situation where you have to pretend every time you walk in, like that affects your mental health, that affects your physical well-being. It affects how you interact with the world around you and the people around you. And so that's why Heuristic is so important to me, is because we are working with organizations to really foster this environment where they have the right policies in place, the right programs in place, the infrastructure, so that they can bring in people who can show up authentically to work. And that's how we started this company, and that's the direction we're going in.
That is so exciting to hear. I feel like so often people really genuinely feel like they can't bring their whole selves to work. And you don't realize how exhausting it is, right? To almost conceal a part of yourself or not be able to bring your whole self to work. So I love that that's really a primary focus for you all. And I'd love to lean in a little bit more on that. So leaders really need to understand and value the fact that the one size fits all approach, it really doesn't work, right, for every employee and every organization. So would love to hear from you both. What are some ways that leaders can really foster an environment where all employees feel included and ensure their needs are being met? And on that note, how can leaders also ensure employees who identify as LGBTQIA+ feel included in their place of work? So it's kind of like a two-part question. Would love to hear from you both.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristin, you mind if I get started on this?
Please.
Okay, so I want to take one step back and say it's not just the leaders, right? It's the organization as a whole. You have to create a culture and an environment and philosophies around that environment that allow for this sense of inclusion and belonging to be fostered across the organization. With that being said, even when there is a cohesive culture, a cohesive philosophy around talent and how to develop your people, you still want to allow for the flexibility for managers to lead, connect, and build relationships with their direct reports in a way that is consistent, not just with that culture, but with the leader themselves. So letting them lead from this place of autonomy. One thing that Kristin and I often work with the organizations that we consult, they're usually in early stage, growth stage startups. And we work with them to revise their hiring so that they are hiring based on the explicit and stated values of their organization. Because when you do that, you're actually enabling your individual contributors as well as your managers, because you're trusting them. You hired them based off a set of values. They've bought into it. They add to it. They contribute. And so you're able to trust their decisions and having autonomy over the work and the decisions they make with their employees. With all that being said, I think that some of the things that leaders can do to ensure that they are fostering an environment of inclusion and of belonging and making sure that their employees' needs are being met are things like connecting your employees' work to the purpose of the organization. That includes actually understanding what your employees do. I recently saw a stat where it's like 65% of employees don't actually think that their managers know what they do on a day-to-day basis. And that blows my mind. To have a direct report and you're just like, oh, they're hanging out over there. That's not a way we should be operating our companies or our teams. So really understanding what they do and caring more than just about the results. And I find that, purpose inspires individuals to see why their work in the workplace matters. And then they also work to collaborate with others so that they can find a common way forward. Another thing I think that leaders really need to lean into is recognizing accomplishments. This includes things like, regularly defining and communicating what success looks like in your organization and being transparent about that. That includes advocating for your employees' development, appreciating employees when they exhibit growth and also achieve these goals, as well as making others, both from peer to peer as well as upper management, aware of their employees' accomplishments. The third thing that I want to mention just about bringing inclusion into the workplace in general is also, I find that I recently read an article that was talking about modern leadership and how modern leaders are more influencers than they are a dictator about what should be, seen in the workplace. And I think that is extremely applicable to the new age of bringing authenticity into the workplace, but really creating this interpersonal connection by encouraging collaboration, both inside and out of your team, as well as, introducing those employees to potential mentors. And that includes things like, deconstructing silos that exist within the organization, facilitating those, connections. And I think all of those actions in and of itself help foster a sense of belonging in the workplace.
Wow, Mercedes, you just dropped like 10 gems of knowledge. And I'm sure the audience will agree with me that that was very helpful. And thank you for sharing all of that. Everything that you said resonated with me. Kristin, would love to hear if you have anything to add on as well.
Sure. So my experience comes from like sitting inside an HR organization and specifically recruiting. And so when I think about how to effectively roll out programs like this, I think it's important for the folks in the administration position to think about who have we not heard from every time you roll out something new, any policy, any communication, any program. And it can start today. Today, you can start with replacing anything that says husband, wife, or spouse with partner. And all communications, all of your HR channels, your summer party invitations, and your Slack. You can do that today. But I think the larger conclusion, like to tie it specifically to the LGBTQ community, is to talk about who are you centering when you decide to do something inside of your organization, and making sure that every voice is heard. And it's hard to think about voices that aren't your own, but that's an exercise in empathy that I think decision makers and leadership should always exercise in the office. For example, your parental leave policy. Is it inclusive to gay parents who might want to adopt today before you have the situation arrive? I'm a big fan of like, if you build it right, they will come. I'm a recruiter by trade. And so I want to appeal to a talented candidate by already having all of the support they need when they arrive. So when they ask me that question, am I safe here? Am I going to thrive here? I can say yes, because I know they've already built it.
Yeah, I think that piece around proactivity, right? Like not waiting and being reactive, but really being proactive and building it out beforehand. Like that is so key and so important. So thank you for that and for lifting that up. I just want to remind the audience, we are welcoming questions from y'all as well. And if we have time, we will be asking both Mercedes and Kristin those questions. So feel free to submit them via chat. So I want to shift a little bit for you two and talk a little bit about what is talent philosophy and why does it matter?
Yeah, so that is definitely my wheelhouse, and I'm going to step right into that. I think that talent philosophy, it provides the foundation for talent management success, right? It's how to manage or how to best manage your talent in order to achieve your business success, as well as create a transparent work environment. I think that having a clear talent philosophy is really aligned to the idea of having and defining your company culture. And then when you clearly articulate that, you have your culture and your talent philosophy. It also allows, your execs to align their team around, a common vision. It clarifies for employees how to succeed and how to obtain the resources they need in order to succeed. And then ultimately, it provides a true North Star for your organization to develop HR practices and policies and programs and things of that sort. Do you have anything to add, Kristin?
I don't. I think you've got that covered.
Awesome. I will say that without an explicit talent philosophy, I find that from the employee's perspective, it'll interfere with like their vision of the company because they're making their decisions based off of what they observe, not what is actually is supposed to happen in the workplace, so to speak. So, for instance, if you're seeing maybe somebody get promoted, that doesn't make sense because you're like, oh, I'm doing the same work that they are. But if there's not a clear talent philosophy, you don't understand that. And so it allows for biases. And then that's like the manager's perspective as well. It's like we see without an explicit talent philosophy or, defined culture, we see opportunities for bias to interfere with the way that they lead their employees, how they promote their employees. We start seeing, disjointed cultures across the organization. I mean, that really impacts everything from, productivity to innovation and things of that sort. And ultimately, when we talk about, the business risk or the business reason for why you want to invest in defining your culture and defining your talent management strategy, without it, you see the potential for increased turnover of high potential employees. And that's given the lack of transparency as well as unexplained inequities that I was talking about earlier. We also will see things like decreased engagement. If there isn't a cohesive accountability system in place, for developing teams and rectifying bad behaviors, then employees are going to be disenchanted with their employer or with their manager and things of that sort. And then the last thing is also the capability gap that you have in your organization. If you're not transparent about how to grow your employees, if you're not transparent about what their directions or their steps are within the company, we'll start seeing personal preferences and biases guide managers in how they grow their teams. And this ultimately prohibits the ability for a company to build quality or depth of talent, because it's a very random approach to talent management rather than having something solidified to follow along the line.
Yeah, I think that point you brought up about the biases, right? And there's just so much room for bias and like so many ways that organizations operate. And I think really being aware of that and proactively trying to mitigate that is just so important. Kristin, did you have anything to add?
Well, I'll just say that when, like, just like Mercedes said, like when the barriers of success are removed, then employees of color and any type of diversity can be shown fulfilling, supportive cultures free of the bias. And that is where true like productivity and capacity and creativity can thrive. So it's always important to think about like the after effects from a business perspective or an employment perspective. If we solve some of these problems, it's going to net positive for everyone. So something to work on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Jenny shares that they tell their manager that when they don't state what they expect, we are choosing our own adventure, and then they're going to get what they get from the team. And so again, I think that clear communication and the transparency, like all of that plays into employee experience very much. This is a great conversation. I'm loving this because I think these are things that people don't necessarily think about on a daily basis, but it affects our daily experiences in our workplace and in our jobs. So I'm loving this. All right, so our next question for you is, given that it's human resources, giving humans the resources that they need to succeed, right, should be pretty obvious. But why do you think companies slack in providing humans with the resources that they need?
Kristin, you can go ahead and start this off.
Actually, you go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is around, human resources and companies slacking in really providing humans with the resources that they need to succeed. And why is that?
Okay. Yeah. So, everything that I like to talk about, it all falls back into culture, right? I think that culture is something that runs through everything that you create from an organization, from your business development strategy to how you work with your customers, to talent philosophies and things of that sort. So, I think that if a company slacks, in providing these humans with the resources they need to succeed, it's probably because they don't have a clearly defined work culture that actually provides for their people. We always want to create resources that actually empower all of your employees to succeed and to show up at work. So some of the things that might prohibit this from happening are things like antiquated HR policies, systemic barriers in talent management and talent acquisition. That's a real thing that we see, and that's why most people are starting to shift to things like, rubric hiring and blind resume screenings and things of that sort. Some other things that might influence the humans and the resources is, lack of diversity and executive and leadership decision making. We all here are probably vastly aware that when you have a very monotonous exec team, you get a monotonous or one direction solution to a problem. So those are some of the things that I think actually create this disjoint between having adequate resources for their people. I will say that, as an organization goes about building their policies around providing resources and tools to their employees, it's really helpful to go back and actually revisit your values and your cultural aspirations. And then when you do that and you have the question of like, okay, am I going to introduce this resource, this technology, this policy understand, like, does that actually align with where you want your organization to be or your team to be in 3 weeks? Does it align with where you want to be in 3 months? What about 3 years? You know, and simply asking those questions will put you in the right direction and making sure that you're empowering your employees to come to work.
Kristin, any additions?
Yeah, I'll just add that we're all victims of a patriarchal, racist, misogynistic society. It's built into all of us. And so why do people, you know, overlook some of these things? Why have they not chosen to center some of these things before? It's because they're not equipped, and probably by this point, everyone should take the time to educate themselves, but it's almost always a reason of the lack of education of why and how these things affect each other. It's all intersectional, it all overlaps. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge that the solution to all of these things is more diversity of thought. And so we have to manually insert some of those diversity pieces into the puzzle now. And then naturally over time, I think it will develop into more creative problem solving at leadership, mid-level, and individual contributor levels throughout companies.
Yeah, no, that definitely resonates with me. And we've been getting some real gems from the audience as well. And so Amanda shared that, you know, culture shouldn't just happen, it should be created, right? And so like that, again, the proactivity behind it, like really shifting that mindset. I'm loving this. So we have a question. We're gonna take some questions from the audience. So we had a question come in from Jenny about, they work for a very diverse company where everyone is remote and globally located across different time zones. So often the communication that does happen is not synchronous. So how can you help others feel included in teams where connections are not often or easy?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of smart people brainstorming how to solve for these virtual situations that a lot of folks are finding themselves in for the first time. Some companies have been virtual for a long time, and so they've made some great improvements on some of these things. But I think what's important is to celebrate everyone's humanity, right? It's interesting in the work that Mercedes and I do, we are very often reading feedback from employees who are taking surveys to ask them what they would want to change, what would make things better. And you would be shocked how many folks find themselves disjointed like this. And they say, I miss my coworkers. I want to be connected. And then at the same time, sometimes they'll say, too many meetings. I don't want to do stuff outside of work. But all of that is part of the human experience. And so sometimes it's really silly, simple things like turning on your video and celebrating someone's birthday, sending them cookies, no matter where they are in the world, really simple, like acts of kindness. Sometimes it has to be a lot deeper to get people to connect in those ways. It really depends on each company's culture and like how they prioritize those interactions. But at the end of the day, if Jenny, if you feel that you feel a little disconnected, what I would always recommend is have the courage, if you can find it, to raise your hand and express that. Because the leadership inside of your company, if they're not fully aware that it's a problem, they might not be prioritizing a solution towards it. And by raising a hand, drawing a little bit of attention to that sort of disjointed feeling, perhaps they can direct more resources to it. And it might seem like those little things don't mean a lot individually, but collectively, if you feel this, you know, some more love coming your way, or you see other people being celebrated and appreciated, we're hoping that those little experiences add up to a culture that's a lot more community and joined together.
And I'll add one other thing to that, just to piggyback off what Kristin was speaking. I think one of the easiest things you can do is articulating your communication hierarchy. That, especially in asynchronous, gosh, that was a hard word for me, organizations, just being transparent. It's like, what works best for you? What time frames are you online? Things of that sort. We've worked with organizations to set that up because, for instance, I'm an email gal. I like to receive emails and respond to them at these certain times of day, but Kristin is not an email gal. She is Slack and text all the way. And so just being honest and transparent with those types of communication hierarchies as your organization grows and as you work with other people across your team and different people in your organization.
Yeah, removing those barriers, right? Like there's already like thousands of miles between us. And if we can reduce some of these technological barriers and make it a little bit more authentic by getting those like complications out of the way, like do we Slack or do we email? I think that's a good start for sure.
Yeah, I think, like you said, clarifying communication is just very important. And also, Shannon responded to Jenny's question as well, and shared that they found that using local language in a small way helps promote relationships as well. So for instance, when addressing a colleague in Japan, Shannon opens up with konnichiwa, right? So I think showing a level of respect for others as well, and like the differences, is really a beautiful thing as well. I want to be mindful of time. There was one question that came in from Monica. So if you both could just spend a moment addressing it, around sharing more about your experience around coworkers' friendships and how that might enhance company culture. Because bringing your whole self to work is something the company that Monica works for encourages, since they have a young workforce. But then there's also gray areas that happen, right? Where there are close friendships or there are friendship fallouts that can happen. So how can we help navigate that?
So when I look at having, your work husband or wife, your work spouse, and your, work best friends and things of that sort, I think it's important to form those bonds with others, just because it does provide that social network for you both personally and professionally. The other thing is how we were talking about when there are problems that arise in the workplace, you have allies that you can trust and go to, that even if they do not necessarily need the same benefits that you do, or they're experiencing a slightly different challenging, you guys can advocate on behalf of one another. A company may be able to ignore one voice, but they can't ignore multiple voices. And so I think that fostering those relationships within the organization is extremely important. Whether the part of the question about what happens when there's a falling out or things of that sort, I don't necessarily have an answer to at that time. That's something I'd have to brainstorm.
Yeah, I'll add that like with any relationship, like boundaries are really important. And some people will, like, I'm a super friendly, let's be buds at work type of person. Now I have one coworker, but when I had large offices full of them, I was like that a lot. But there are people who aren't like me. And like, that's always the challenge, right? Is to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Someone might want to leave work at work, and that's also okay. Now, depending on the culture of the company, it might be like more or less strange in any given situation. But I think it's just the boundaries piece is good for any sort of dynamic, to understand and respect how each person interacts. And I happen to work with one of my very best friends in the world, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think that the strength that gives me exceeds any sort of weirdness that might ever happen, because we are very connected on our personal lives as well. And so there's no secrets between us. But if someone wants that sort of dynamic, and then if there's any sort of conflict that comes from like personal life blending over into private life, which is happening quite a bit in the past year, as we've all known, we're all looking into people's rooms now. We've seen people in their pajamas now. We've seen their children. It's a lot more personal than it was before. And so having that extra degree of respect and kindness and patience with those relationships and those boundaries, I think is a good way to approach that.
Mercedes and Kristin, I am loving this conversation. I hate that we have to cut it short. I feel like I have learned so much from y'all, and I'm sure the audience has as well. And I just really wanted to thank you both for taking time today to talk to us about this important subject. So thank you again, deeply, deeply.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us. And just one final note, if you do want to, explore what your company culture health is and things of that sort, we do have a free downloadable audit on our website. It's just heuristic.co. Definitely take a look at it, understand the different dimensions that lead to, building a healthy and sustainable culture for your organization.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for that conversation. Wonderful to hear you.